Hello and welcome. It's Wednesday, November 2nd, 2016, and if you're here for optimizing technical product content for SEO, XML, and Findability with Joe Gelb and Keith Schengili-Roberts, you're in the right place. This is the latest edition of the Scott and Val Show. We're pleased to be celebrating a milestone today as this is the Content Wrangler's 100th webinar. We're proud to be one of the largest content marketing channels on BrightTalk, and we now have over 15,000 members in our community, and we're glad that you are part of it. My name's Trey DeGrassi. I'm Scott Abel's assistant and the webinar producer for the Content Wrangler channel. Scott's missing a webinar today for the first time since at this very moment he's on a plane flying to the East Coast to meet with a client. Scott will return to our next webinar on November 16th. I'm very pleased to be joined today by the co-host of the Scott and Val Show, Val Swisher, founder and CEO of Content Rules. Val, are you on the line?
I sure am, Trey. It's me and you. We're going to have to get our inner Scott going here.
That's right, and that is a big challenge because we know that's hard to live up to, but we'll do our best. Thank you for joining me here today. I really appreciate it. So where are you broadcasting from?
So today I am in Chicago, where it's not very sunny. Not very sunny. Chicago today.
Okay. Oh, well. All right, so let's cover a few housekeeping items, and then we'll turn the show over to our co-presenters. Today's webinar sponsors are Zoomin Software and IXIASOFT. Zoomin helps organizations deliver content on demand across all customer touchpoints quickly, easily, and precisely. Global brands like Jive, ServiceNow, Hitachi, and Cisco trust Zoomin to deliver their content to documentation portals, knowledge bases, call centers, search engines, customer communities, and to devices that are a part of the Internet of Things. Learn more about Zoomin and request a demo at www.zoominsoftware.com. IXIASOFT is a trusted global leader in the XML content management software industry whose signature product, the IXIASOFT DITA CMS, is an award-winning end-to-end component content management solution. From authoring to reviewing, localizing, and publishing, the DITA CMS provides all the tools required for large global organizations to support their entire DITA documentation process. For more information, please visit IXIASOFT.com. All right, if you haven't already, please sign up for the Content Wrangler's Insiders mailing list. Being a member gives you exclusive access to members-only content, invitations to in-person and virtual events, and sneak peeks at new tools and technologies. Sign up on our website today at thecontentwrangler.com. At the end of today's show, we're going to give away 5 copies of Author Experience by Rick Yagodich, one of 7 books currently in the Content Wrangler Content Strategy series from XML Press. We will be publishing 5 more titles beginning in early 2017. Check out the series on any major bookseller's website or visit xmlpress.net to learn more. All right, a few housekeeping items. Asking questions. Audience members can ask a text-based question of the presenters today by choosing the Questions tab below their webinar viewing window. We will answer as many questions as we can during the Q&A period immediately following the presentation. And if we don't get to your question, don't worry. We'll have one of the presenters get back to you with an answer by email in the days following the webinar. Please be aware that if you're watching the webinar in full screen mode, you must come out of full screen in order to see the tabs panel below the viewing window. Answering polling questions. We'll be asking a polling question of the audience today. To answer, simply click on the Poll Question tab below the viewing window and choose one of the answers. Once you make your selection, you'll be able to see how your fellow audience members voted, and please be aware that you can only choose one answer. Rating the presenters. At the end of the webinar, we'd really appreciate you providing us a star rating with 1 to 5, with 1 being low and 5 being high. Please rate our presenters on the content of the presentation and not based on any technical challenges that may occur. We do have some attachments with the webinar today, which you can download at any point. There's 4 links in the webinar. You can find these web links in the Attachments tab below your webinar viewing panel. And finally, watching the recording. Yes, there will be a recording, and you can watch it at the same URL you're using right now. Feel free to share with friends and colleagues, and we hope that you will. The webinar recording is usually available 15 minutes after the end of the webinar. Okay, that's it. Without further delay, Val.
Yes, indeed. Well, today I'm very excited. We had two special guests as our presenters. Our first guest is Joe Gelb, president of Zoomin Software. Hey, Joe, are you on the line?
Hey, Val. This is Joe.
Excellent. Thanks so much for being here again. We really appreciate it. And where are you broadcasting from today?
I am broadcasting from Sunnyvale, which is also not quite so sunny, but that's where I am.
Not so sunny, Sunnyvale. And our second guest is Keith Schengili-Roberts, a DITA specialist at IXIASOFT. He's also a DITA evangelist and a technical writing nerd, my favorite type of nerd. Keith, are you on the line?
Yes, I am. Hello.
Hi there. And where are you broadcasting from?
I am broadcasting from Toronto, Ontario, which is also, interestingly enough, overcast. So seems to be rather cloudy in North America in general right now.
Apparently so. Well, thanks so much for being with us today. I'm going to turn the presentation over to you. I'm going to be in the background if you need me, and I'll be back at the end to answer audience questions. And audience, please make sure that you put your questions in the questions tab on the Bright Talk screen. And with that, Keith, it's all yours.
All right then. Well, without further ado, let's go to let's get into it. The title for this is "Seek and You Shall Find," talking about optimizing SEO for your technical product content. Now, let's talk a little bit more about me. I am, as Val mentioned previously, I'm a market researcher and DITA evangelist at IXIASOFT. And what I actually do is that I work and promote the idea of DITA within the technical writing community. I also liaison with OASIS, which is the standards body that ratifies and promotes the DITA standard. And I sit on the DITA adoption, lightweight DITA, and the DITA technical committees. I'm also a general industry researcher, trying to understand why companies want to work with DITA. What are the main factors for moving to DITA? I also am a lecturer on information architecture at the University of Toronto, and the gray hairs you see in the picture there are well earned because I have over 10 years of DITA XML experience and about a quarter century of technical writing experience in general. Some of you may also know me as DITA Writer. This is an industry blog I started just over 5 years ago, and it's just shy of a 250,000 hits in that time. And it has regularly updated information on things like DITA conferences, DITA books, companies using DITA, the various DITA CCMSs out there, editors, so on and so forth. I also want to mention that there's also information on news and views on DITA usage and feature interviews with those making a difference in the world of DITA. And now I'll pass it over to Joe briefly.
Thanks, Keith. So there's a picture of me on doing what I do, which is dynamic delivery evangelism and implementing solutions around delivery systems, along with a fair amount of experience with structured documentation implementation. This picture is a picture in Iceland, and actually in the background is a volcano. This is the volcano. Are you hearing me better now? The picture is a volcano in Iceland, and this is the volcano that Jules Verne wrote a story about around where he journeyed to the center of the Earth. So he left the bright exterior and the green to go and get to the other side and find and have interesting experiences. And it's very similar to your website and your content. Meaning, once your customers come to your site and leave that green, bright interior of the marketing website, and they dig down into this large world of content, seeking answers and engaging experiences. So it's kind of a nice metaphor for content delivery and better engagement around content, which we're going to be talking about more and more today. So we'll turn it over to Trey for a following question.
Yeah, let's start. We have a polling question for our audience now. I'm going to trigger the polling question right now so that people can start voting. So please give us an answer. If you could, we'd appreciate it. We're just trying to find out where the audience is coming from and what they know or think about product content delivery with respect to SEO. There are 4 choices there. You can only choose one, and we're going to leave the poll open for about 1 minute so that people can vote, and then we'll see what the results tell us. If anybody is in full screen, you need to come out of full screen in order to click on the poll question tab below the webinar viewing window. All right, now I'm starting to see some votes come in. There's a little bit of a lag time there, and we'll give it about 30 more seconds. Okay, so it looks like it's pretty evenly split between the last 3 answers. So no one's really telling us right now that it's not essential, and that's probably good from the perspective of both Keith and Joe. Looks like it's about 30% for the second answer, that it's essential, but the department does not put emphasis on SEO when authoring and delivering. About 33% of it's essential, and I believe delivery can improve SEO, but I'm not sure how. And about 37% are saying that it's very essential and that they can't imagine not taking SEO into consideration when authoring and delivering product content. Okay, guys, I'm going to leave that open so we can get some better results, but why don't you guys take it away from there?
Great. Thanks, Trey. Okay, so in the past, many of our companies, probably all of our companies, were distinguishing themselves from competitors based on things like features, functionality, pricing. But these days, when it's harder and harder to distinguish our products based on these parameters, based on features and functionality and even pricing, so companies are looking for other ways to distinguish themselves. The whole idea of customer experience is becoming more and more a battle cry for distinguishing products. So as we shift to the customer experience as a distinguishing factor, so we're seeing that according to Forrester and other studies, so 93% of leadership are focusing on customer experience improvements as opposed to product enhancements or even employee training. So this gives an indication that investment in customer experience has been growing and growing, also primarily as a way of distinguishing the offering. And therefore, along with the focus, budgets are also moving in that direction as well. We also see from Gartner in a study of corporate leadership that 89% of companies expect to compete mostly on the basis of a customer experience. So there's also a recognition more and more that the battlefield around winning new customers and keeping customers is more and more around customer experience and less and less around the actual product itself. Okay, so there are a lot of ways to improve the customer experience. You can improve the customer experience based on better product, better UI, but better access to content and support is also a very important lever in improving that customer experience. And that's really the field that we're all in. That's why we're on this webinar. And we're going to be talking about how to create a better customer experience for our customers via better access and more effective access to the content. And the content that we're developing, this product or this formal product content, this curated content, is the content that folks are using to use and use our products, troubleshoot our products, and to understand more about the products as they're looking to purchase them. So, whereas in the past we would develop our content and throw it over the fence onto our website in form of PDF or online help or even web pages. So the idea more and more is moving towards digital experience. Digital experience means moving towards a delivery of content to all customer touch points. Folks are coming to our website, they're calling us in customer service, They're trying to get self-help. They're interacting with us using mobile applications, mobile apps, and through social media communities. There are the other touch points that are coming in more and more. We're talking about smart bots, or we're talking about Internet of Things. This is just growing. We no longer can educate our customers where to find us. We need to be educated by our customers where they want to be found and where they need to be finding us, and making sure that our content is there in an effective way so that they can use that content and do what they need to do. So that's the idea of digital experience. So moving from content publishing to web content management into a more comprehensive view, which is digital experience. So when we talk about improving customer experience via content through this digital experience, there's a number of ways we can do that. One is, and the primary focus is helping folks to get answers as quickly as possible. A better experience means I have a question, I have a particular role in my company, I have a particular thing I need to get done, I have a particular context of what I'm trying to do, maybe a product I'm using, maybe a product I'm thinking about purchasing, and I need an answer to help me do my job. So getting an answer as quickly as possible is probably a primary way of improving customer experience using content. The second thing we want to do is provide better engagement. So on the one hand, we want folks to be able to get answers as quickly as possible and move on with their life. On the other hand, we want to use this content as a facilitator for engaging with our customers by recommending other content that might be useful, maybe training material, or maybe other types of community posts of how other folks are using your products. But using that answer, that quick answer, as a facilitator of ways of engaging with the customer and creating more touch points with the customer. The more touch points or positive touch points you have with your customer, generally the better relationship you're going to have with your customer. So again, customer experience means getting better answers and creating engagement. Answering and engaging with customers through product delivery can be broken down into 6 parts. One is search SEO, helping people to find the content better. The other one is personalizing content, meaning allowing folks to find content according to what we know about them. We'll talk about that later on in the presentation. And in addition to using the personalization as a way of engaging with them, we have the collaborating with our customers as they give us feedback or asking their suggestions or recommendations, and getting them engaged and into the product and into the whole process. Gamification, encouraging people to collaborate with us, encouraging people to engage with us on our site and with our products. Content updates, being able to push content updates to them, again, creating more ways of engaging with the customer and building that relationship with them. And recommendations, using the content that they found, these answers, as ways to discover other content, whether it be content recommendations or other product recommendations or products and services that we can recommend to them. Today, we're going to be focusing on the SEO or aspect of the product content delivery, and I will turn it over to Keith.
All right. Well, hello there, folks. So let's get this this sort of classical joke out of the way. So, where's the best place to hide a dead body? And of course, the answer is, from an SEO perspective, on the second page of Google. Now, one of the goals of this presentation is really to provide you with the sort of information you need to know in order to better optimize your content for search engines like Google, so that when you actually come to listing your information online, that people do not have to search for, because as we all know, if things actually make it only to the second page of Google, no one's going to see it. So that that's really what SEO is all about. But first, I want to tell you a little tale. I want to tell you about a particular story that I ran into. This is from a few years ago. Whoops! Hang on. There we are. Okay, got the right slide. So what first made me think of this subject in terms of SEO and technical documentation in general, and then more specifically DITA, was an incident that happened to me a couple of years ago when our clothes washer at home was in the middle of washing a load of clothes, and then up and stopped, still filled with water, still filled with laundry in it. This happened, of course, late on a Sunday afternoon, so there was basically no chance of calling a repairman who could come over and take a look at it immediately. And by the way, we also have 2 teenage girls, so let's just say we couldn't be without a working clothes washer for very long. So, I did what pretty much everyone else listening to this would do, which was to actually go to Google. And sorry, I'm waiting for the slide to present. Forward. Hang on. There we go. So what I did is, as I said, pretty much what everyone listening would do was go to Google, and I typed in my case Kenmore Series 80, which is the type of washer not draining, and sure enough, a whole bunch of things came up. And what first came up were some YouTube videos, followed by some handy tips provided by both users and professionals. And in the end, the video provided me with all the information I needed to know. Basically, what happened is that it was a busted lid switch was actually the problem. I used the info from the video to jury-rig my own washer and then get it to work. I then found the replacement part online and then later repaired it. And by the way, I also just want to point out here, look at the number of views that this particular video about a very specific problem actually garnered. Now, I took the screenshot maybe about a month or so ago, so that was 211,000 hits. So of course, I'm in technical documentation. I'm curious to see. Okay, well, I went through the sort of crowdsourced information about this particular washer, and I wanted to continue on to see if in fact any further information would come up. And so I did continue the search, and the manual never came up in the search. I actually went to about 10 pages worth of Google, and it never turned up. So then I did a different search looking specifically for the manual, and then I looked up the information on the problem. And if you take a look there, the problem is actually listed, but the correct solution in this case was not. Now, having said that, perhaps this came out well before the washer actually made it out into the world, so to speak, hit the streets. But usually there are versions of publications that will come after the launch that will look at introducing information that comes only after it's actually been in use for a while. And basically, what I'm trying to say is that this was basically a missed opportunity for this particular manufacturer to engage with its audience. And I also want to mention at this point that one of the first things you need to think about is, in fact, writing to engage with your audience. So the previous example underscores how important it is to anticipate your users' needs. If the information is improperly targeted, is not well described, or is missing, users just will not be able to find it. So this is why knowing your users is really important. You have to understand why have they come to your content, and also what are they seeking to accomplish. This is why, and as a lecturer in information architecture, I can't emphasize this strongly enough. This is why having effective personas and scenarios to help guide your technical writers should really be considered a priority. The other nice thing is that if you're looking at this from a DITA perspective, DITA's topic types set the stage for how technical writers can communicate with their audience. If you're writing concepts, you need to think about, what is this thing and what is it for? If you're writing a reference topic, what are the correct settings? If you're writing a task, how do I accomplish this particular procedure? And for troubleshooting, how do I fix this particular problem I'm having? Now, another thing that's worth pointing out is that, there is not just one type of search engine out there. So, there's really 3 basic types. There's the sort of, the external public-facing content type engines such as Google, Bing, and Yahoo. Then there's federated search engine solutions, which might be used by your company. And then thirdly, there's also dynamic digital experience platforms for producing technical content such as Zoomin. They're aware of content entitlements and restrictions. Now, what I want to emphasize here is that each of these searches are tuned differently and have their own use cases instead of content that is indexing. But having said that, much of what appears in this presentation can be considered as best practices for all of them. Just want to acknowledge that. Now, another thing that I've also run up across several times in my researches is that, some people think that search engine optimization is basically magic. And I really want to emphasize, no, it really, really isn't. There are agencies that can certainly help your company with SEO. But if you do some search, if you do some searching for the information yourself, it is out there and it really is available. In fact, one place I'd really highly recommend as a starting place is Google Webmasters. They have their own page on what is essentially SEO and techniques to help people better have their content appear at say at the top of the Google searches. They also tend to have, depending on the region, monthly or weekly sometimes meetings of various geographic areas. So there's a North American meeting that's held on YouTube. There's also one for Asia, one for Europe. If you're at all interested, definitely check them out. They're a gold mine for information. Another thing that's worth pointing out is understanding how search engines work. There's really three key phases. The first is where your content is crawled by a search engine spider, which finds new or changed information and then retrieves it. Then the search engine itself analyzes and indexes your website content, and then a user submits a query to a search engine providing a list of possible links. Now, another question that I feel I should mention is that there may be cases where you may not want to have your docs actually visible. Some companies opt not to have their documentation spiderable. A company may want to have search engine to focus exclusively on marketing content, for example, and where there's a need to point to a company-sponsored search engine specifically for docs. In that case, in your web pages, you can simply add this information, what is known as robots.txt, to either the individual web pages or to the root of the web server. And this is some very simple code. I'm not going to go into details. There's plenty of information on this on, I love this, robotstxt.org if you want more information. Now, another thing you might want to think about is ensuring that you have a sitemap.xml file. This is basically food for web spiders. They have a better understanding as to where your content is. This can include information on what the parent URL for your website content is, the URL for a specific page, the date that web page was last updated, how frequently that page is likely to change, and the priority of a given page in comparison to other pages on the website. Now, the cool thing here is that a lot of these things can actually be generated automatically for you by various web-based programs, and you can also tweak things such as, say, the priority value. And by the way, that it ranges from 0.0 to 1.0, with 1.0 being the highest, and default is typically set to 0.5. You can tweak this if you like to increase, if you want to say that this page is some, you want more people to see this, the search engines will recognize that and will try to prioritize that. The one thing that's worth pointing out, however, is that don't set every page to 1.0, because if you do that, the search engines will go, okay, they're trying to basically game us. We'll basically set everything down to low, either average or zero priority. So be judicious in how you do this. Now, in terms of DITA and metadata, and I am a DITA evangelist. I really do have to talk a little bit about DITA here. The nice thing is that metadata can be incorporated at both the map and topic levels. Book maps use the book meta and topic meta elements as containers for metadata, and topics incorporate metadata within the prologue. Metadata can then drive faceted search and keyword search in dynamic publishing engines such as Zoomin, for example. And by the way, in the DITA OT is output primarily the metadata as Dublin core, which is the little DC you might just be able to make out in the code there, Dublin core metadata. But there is basically a fundamental problem when it comes to Dublin core, is that the major search engines, they just don't really do anything with it. It's essentially the major search engines have said that this is not something that they are that they actually use in active ranking. They acknowledge that it's there, but they don't actually use it for anything. So while it may seem from a DITA to DITA OT perspective, it might be a good idea to mark up your content. From an SEO perspective solely, it really has no impact. Now, it can be advantageous from a content management perspective because it can provide information on when a topic is created and by whom, and that might be useful to know in general. And also, say the local web server may also be able to filter content on Dublin core values. And another question that may come up is, well, what about keywords in Google in terms of HTML, meta keywords content? And basically, forget it. Again, there's absolutely no point, at least from an SEO perspective. So, in fact, to underscore that point, here is an excerpt from the Google Webmaster blog site, which says right up front, Google does not use keyword meta tag in web ranking. That image, by the way, is from 2009, but they recently reconfirmed that point. So at this point, what is important to Google and the major search engines? Well, it's basically the things you see here: title, the relevant links, and actually not displayed there, also short descriptions, and last but definitely not least, the quality of your content. So let's start. Let's start with title. Some basic rules to keep in mind. You want to make it count. So avoid boilerplate titles such as introduction. Make them descriptive. So in other words, what you need to know about the Vebulon 5, assuming that is a product. Also, you need to make them concise. Google truncates long titles that are over 70 to 75 characters long. And also, don't overload them with keywords such as, and I used to see this sort of thing all the time, where you'd have a title that said all about the Vebulon 5, Vebulon 5, 5th Vebulon, Vebulon 5, 5th Vebulon, Vebulon the 5th, Acme Corporation's Vebulon. It's tiring to read, and believe me, from a search engine perspective, it's the same sort of thing. So be descriptive, but be make sure it has impact with the reader. Another thing that's also worth pointing out is short descriptions. So if you're writing this as DITA content, they are displayed immediately after the title and the link. So you can see here's a sample source from the IXIASOFT website. It's transformed to XHTML, and then in the Google search, sure enough, the link comes up, and then the short description immediately follows after it. So I need to be careful here. Now, the important thing here is that short descriptions have an impact, or what is known as click-throughs. So they're not directly factored into search engine rankings, but understand that user behaviors are, and Google measures click-through rates, which is known as CTR. So a well-written, explanatory short description will ensure more click-throughs, because if you just say, introduction to the Vebulon 5, it doesn't really tell you an awful lot. But if you say something like, introduction to the Vebulon 5, which does this, that, and the other thing, which is, more perhaps more direct to the audience, it's more likely to be clicked on in a search result, and Google makes note of that, and then over time will rank it higher. So the more click-throughs it gets, the more relevant it seems to the likes of Google, and it will move it on up on terms of rankings. Another thing we're thinking about is links and relationship tables. So one metric that is thought to influence web page rankings are the number of links to a page. Now, while more weight is applied from external web pages pointing to one of your own web pages than internal ones, it's also thought that an internal link hierarchy also counts. So if you're using, the DITA-specific content, adding something like a relationship table would not only be good practice, but may also enhance SEO as well. In terms of writing effective short descriptions for SEO, a short description tells a reader why it would be worth clicking on. So for a task, you want to tell users what they can accomplish. For a concept, tell users about what they're describing and why they should care. For reference, tell users what the reference item does or what it can be used for. And for troubleshooting, describe the symptoms of a problem a survey may encounter and let them know that this topic is there to help them. And by the way, while short best practices suggest that you write 2 full sentences for the short description, Google invariably truncates the search results that it displays for the short description text back to 156 characters. So try to keep it within that limit if you can. And by the way, use the what's known as sort of the upside down pyramid approach to presenting content. Put the most important content first in your short description. Another thing worth pointing out, and this is something that I'm actually going to be actively doing some further research and collaboration with the folks at Zoomin, is looking at schema.org and furthering SEO. So schema.org, and that is the name of the website as well, sponsored by Google, Bing, Yandex, which I believe is the main Russian search engine, and Yahoo, to create a common set of schemas for structured data markup on web pages. So basically, while Dublin Core is not used, basically you can think of this as another way of creating semantically rich content. Basically, this is metadata that that the search engines understand directly. And at the moment, it uses formats such as microdata, RDFA, or JSON's LD formats. And what I'm thinking for DITA right now is that probably RDFA is probably the best way into this. Just going to the next slide, pardon me. Now, current schema.org definitions are not focused on technical documentation, mainly on products. The most common usage you may run across when doing a search on Google is for rich snippets, which describe information about a product or sometimes a service. There are tools that can help RDFA with XHTML support from DITA, but currently at this very moment in time, there's no RDFA to schema.org implementation. As I said again, this is something that I'm looking to perhaps remedy in the future. So that is a possible future direction. Another thing that is worth mentioning in relation to tech docs is that it's also apparent that search engine technology is itself changing. So it used to be that anyone who knew the basics of a Boolean search, anybody who could use and, not, and, or, could expect to get better search results. But Google and other search engines have invested significantly in recent years in what is known as natural language speech recognition, such as Google Now. So in this example you see here, you have a student with their notebook who's asking how many people live on Earth to the browser, and and then Google automatically responds with the answer. Anybody who is familiar with the likes of Siri, of Cortana, this is the sort of thing that comes up more and more over time. And by the way, it's worth mentioning that while the youngest demographic uses voice queries the most, rates are also really high in the adult demographic. So it's not that it's only the youth of today who is using this. It's also middle-aged people like myself and seniors who are also using it. It's actually surprisingly broad usage. And by the way, another thing that's also worth pointing out is that voice query length tends to be a little bit longer, typically phrased as a question, and whereas for a typical text search averages 2 to 3 words, voice is 3 to 5 words, so slightly longer. So there are some implications. Sorry, I didn't finish my point on this slide. Pardon me. By the way, and voice queries do tend to be very much goal-directed, such as finding grocery stores near me, or finding movie theaters near me, things of that nature, or things like how do I fix my clothes washer? Now, there are some implications of voice queries for tech docs. This further emphasizes the focus on meeting the needs of the user. You need to think about why they have come to read your docs and what are the likely scenarios that have led them to your docs. Remember what I said earlier about personas and scenarios? Just re-emphasizing that. You need to also think about what sort of questions are users likely to ask and how can you answer them most effectively. Consider writing titles or short descriptions as possible answers to voice queries. And if you're using DITA and have not yet adopted the DITA 1.3 troubleshooting topic type, you might want to seriously consider doing so. So basically summing up, really want to sort of you want to optimize content for search engines and for users. Consider using sitemap.xml to help spiders find and index your content. Descriptive, concise titles. Effective short descriptions can also increase click-through rates. Relevant links and relationship tables within DITA may also help, and keep an eye for future developments from schema.org. And my last major point here is just to say that, I find it's really wrong to think about doing SEO in terms of, what are known as, air quote tricks. Far better, the best thing you can do is to know your audience and to write to and for them. At this point, I'll pass it over to Joe.
Thanks, Keith. Okay, so let's talk about going beyond Google now. So Keith spoke about SEO and focusing on the Google aspect of things. Now let's kind of go to the next step, go beyond Google and through digital experience management. So we spoke before that digital experience includes aspects such as personalizing content, entitlements meaning providing content based on restrictions. The reality of the situation, at least from my experience working with many corporations, is that not all content is made public. In fact, I would venture to say that most organizations we work with keep a large amount, if not a very large amount of their content locked for particular roles, whether people for customers or partners or internal people. So the idea of providing content on a need-to-know basis becomes very important for digital experience. We'll talk about that shortly. Faceted and weighted search using keywords and synonyms. With Google, we're all trying to figure out what Google wants or what Google likes or what Google is looking for. When folks cross over to your space, okay, you have more control over tuning your search experience based on how people are searching for your content, what they're finding, and what they're looking for but not finding. Okay, and so being able to use faceted search, keywords, taxonomy in order to create a weighted search based on helping people to find content based on what that they're looking for and based on how you have written your content, that becomes very, very important. Content recommendations across channels is not just your website, it's not just your documentation portal, but folks are going to be looking for content across into your community, support knowledge base, and the idea of going ahead and creating a consistent experience across all these different channels through a consistent use of taxonomy, consistent use of terms and keywords becomes more and more important, not just for consistency, but also for searchability and findability. And then there's proactive content going beyond websites at all, and being able to facilitate pushing content to people, to customers, to users via things like IoT apps, augmented reality, and things like this, where based on knowing who they are and what they're trying to do, we can use the same SEO type of tools to find the right content to push to them. So I want to talk now about this content personalization. So generally when folks are going to come to look for content, the vast majority, 80-something%, I think according to the statistics, of people are going to start their search using search engines such as Google or Bing or whatever it be. They're going to go and they're going to try to find content from your site, from your community, whatever it's going to be. Okay, now that's the first the first scenario. The other scenario is that this person has a role or goal in the context. Going forward from what Keith was just mentioning, understanding how folks are, who they are and what they're looking for. So everyone's coming to with a question. They have a role in the organization. They have a goal, something they're trying to do, and they have a context, what products they're using. They're trying to use their services. Now, when they come to your site with that, when they're coming to your site and you have that in mind, then we're able to, to use information that we know about this person to filter down and find the most relevant content to them. So based on user preferences, okay, for example, maybe they have a login. We know about them. We maybe know what they've already purchased. We know that maybe what their role is in the organization based on what we know about them, or based on if they're already customer, et cetera. Geolocation, which we can find out very easily these days from through the browser and through the search engines, different actions they do. Basically, anything we know about the end user will help us to focus in on the right content. Now, content is split into three major components. There's the hidden information, like we spoke about before, content that should be restricted. There's content that is just maybe not restricted but just useless. So we want to push that down on the search results, push that to page 2, maybe page 3. I'm using Keith's joke. And then we want to focus in as much as possible on that most relevant information. Okay? And again, that relevant information, we can help drive that based on tuning SEO, based on taxonomy and terms and things we're going to be talking about. So moving on, the semantic tagging facilitates this findability and this personalization. So that means creating a taxonomy of terms, which is used across content channels. Okay, and that sentence in itself is very loaded and has a lot to talk about. Okay, but driving towards a consistency of usage of terms across different channels, community, doc site, support, all these different things, and classifying or tagging your content based on those terms. So just like Keith was saying, using metadata in DITA or in your HTML or whatever have you, and how Google is ignoring those things. But for you, they become very important because you can control what the tagging is, and you can control in your space how those tags or how the tagging is being used to drive the best experience. So we develop this taxonomy by identifying common terms and common use case scenarios for finding those answers based on, again, that role, goal, and context, like what Keith was saying before. And that drives the faceted words, the faceted search, and it also drives the weighting. Okay? Weighting is kind of like the flip, or very similar to what we'd say SEO, of getting the better results on the top of the Google page. Okay, but for us, it drives personalization, and also that same tagging can drive those entitlements and the recommendations of content based on what we know about the person and what they're looking at this particular moment. So developing a taxonomy from user scenarios, here's an example of kind of a way that you can start getting a handle on what your user scenarios would be using a simple, spreadsheet interface like this, saying, okay, let's try to narrow down common user scenarios. And then, for example, I'm a system admin. I want to do a certain type of activity on a particular type of application. Once you have that scenario, you can start breaking it down into, who's the role, what type of user is doing this, what kind of task are they trying to do, what kind of activity, what products, what's the contact, what's the protocol, other kinds of different parameters that fill out that context. Okay, and what are other keywords might a person like this type into a search window in order to find this particular content? Okay, and this helps you to go through a structured process of creating these personas, like Keith was mentioning, and then developing those user scenarios, and then creating a taxonomy and a list of terms that will help you to tag and drive the weighting of that content. Okay. Now, if we move towards how all this is going to work, we talked about the content, we talked about methods for getting taxonomy, but how does all this fit together from a technology point of view? Okay, so when we talk about digital experience management, DXM, okay, as opposed to WCM or web content management, so digital experience management basically talks about taking your formal product content, whether it's coming from structured content like DITA, whether it's coming from unstructured content, such as HTML or PDF files, Word files, PowerPoints, and things like this. All that it creates the corpus of your formal product content. And the formal product content gets fed into a hub, okay? And once it's in that hub, then you can give access to the content using the weighted searching we were talking about before, using the entitlements we were talking about before across all these touch points, whether it be your documentation portal, the community, knowledge base, call center knowledge bases, and then going to the more advanced or future touch points like Internet of Things and such. And there's different platforms. There's different platforms that are used for engagement that the customers are using, that you're using internally to provide this type of content, and being able to go across and kind of find content across all these different silos becomes the challenge, and something that we really need to tackle to improve that customer experience around finding all the relevant content. That content hub helps us do a number of things. It helps us to facilitate the classification or the tagging of that content, the faceted filtering and search, the authentication and entitlements that we spoke about, the personalization of content. I have a certain role. I'm looking at a particular topic right now. Which content, what content is useful for me? what products do I own? Content recommendations. I'm looking at a particular topic of documentation. What are the most relevant knowledge-based articles or community discussions happening right now that I would be interested in? Allowing our customers to know about updates, going towards gamification and engaging with their customers. Again, going towards really the end game of trying to find out this usage analytics, how people are engaging with us and using that to drive better experience and better business, and really facilitating that whole cross-touch point enrichment that we've been speaking about with the digital experience. So I'd like to thank you very much for your participation. I'll turn it back over to Trey.
All right, it's time for some questions. Val, I think we have a number of questions from our audience. Are you ready to go for it?
I sure am. We have some interesting questions. Here is the first one. I understand meta tags and can use them for SEO purposes separate from any knowledge of XML and or DITA. What is the significance of the relationship between the two?
That's a good question. I have to admit I'm not entirely sure where the question about the relationship between the two is, but I'm guessing that what the person is asking is the relevance of meta tags within HTML, and using perhaps meta tag material or what is known as keywords within content. And keywords is something that can be used within DITA, for example, for expressing content within or signifying keyword content within a web page. My point is that essentially there are two types of, shall we say, keywords. I'm using air quotes here. Keywords within the prologue of a web page are basically ignored by the likes of Google and other search engines, but within the body content of a web page, keywords in terms of relevant terms that might be searched on that are not necessarily wrapped in tags, so to speak. That's a whole separate issue, and that is something very much that the major search engines are interested in. And one of the best ways of finding out what is actually relevant is, of course, looking at your own weblogs, finding what search terms people are using to find the individual web pages on your website, and also talking to, say, your marketing division to find out, what keywords are actually being used by them to help draw people to the website, and also perhaps then to the specific portions of documentation that you want to direct people to.
Thank you. I'd like to go a step, taking what Keith just said and bring it next step over, is that as you discover about this common list of terms and things like that, like Keith was just mentioning, I think that as we have lots of different types of content, going, like you mentioned, XML, DITA, and there's other types of content also, the keywords and these metadata needs to stay separate from the content. The best practices these days is not to focus or not to rely on tagging the content, your source content, inside the content itself. We have videos, we have PDFs, we have PowerPoints, we have all kinds of different content that's going into your site, and there's methods of classifying or tagging your content and providing this effective searchability, this effective tagging without having to rely on these meta tags. So that's something
I agree.
That's,
that's
something that's
I agree with that wholeheartedly.
Yeah, something that's something you need to think about.
Very good, very good. Thank you. This actually leads very well into another question, which is, are there different best practices for metadata around videos at SEO?
Do you want to lead with that, Joe?
I'll pass it to you unless you have.
Oh, okay. No, there are several points around video. Probably the best thing to note is that at least at this point, search engines do not have, well, they may have the capability, but they don't currently try to parse the content of videos. In other words, they don't try to take it and try to create text from it. So one of the best practices you can do is if you can include a transcript of the content beside the video, that of course brings up a number of, and I need to be careful here. I'm using keywords in terms of making the content relevant to the searcher. So if there is information describing the content of the video, such as using a transcript of it, that will definitely boost things like rankings within the search engines. The other thing, of course, is also to adequately describe. If you can't do a transcript of a video, adequately describe what the content of the video is. Come up with a good title for the video and make sure that that's available in the content of your web page. There's some other things which I'm looking into, such as some people are saying that you should have the video content always hosted on your website as you're under your own company domain. Others say that it should in fact be on YouTube, but make sure you have descriptive links within the title. So I'm not sure about that, but definitely things like having a transcription of content and having it adequately described and titled will definitely help in terms of SEO.
Right.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question, Val. You want to ask one final question?
Oh gosh, there's so many good questions. This is so hard. You guys ask great questions. I'm going to pick this one. This one says, that's a lot of information, thank you. But if I just decided to start with SEO, where do I start? Can I take this a step at a time and still see some improvement in being found? What's the one thing I should do first?
Okay. Well, I kind of give a bunch of approaches. I would say that the best thing is to do them all at once. But if in fact you are writing writing individual content, say DITA or no, best things first is write good and descriptive titles for things. It's surprising how often I still run across things that just say introduction, or without mentioning the name of the product, or introducing to what, or information about product X without saying as to why this particular web page would be pertinent to me. So if I had to say start somewhere, just make sure titles are descriptive, and then consider adding short descriptions. Or if you can't do short descriptions because you're not working with DITA, make sure the first couple of sentences of the first paragraph of your content uses the reverse pyramid technique. In other words, make sure you put the most important information at the very top. And that will again help make people realize how pertinent the content on that web page is to them, and then hopefully through things like improved click-through rates will help drive your material to the top. Anything you want to add there, Joe?
No, I would agree with your approach.
Okay.
The titles and the descriptions, yeah.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you both very much. Yeah, let's close out today. Let's give away a few books. Today our winners are James Bauman, Jean Heinen, Melody Locke, Suzanne Patton, and Sherry Watson. I will be sending you an email shortly so you can claim your book. I want to thank you again, Keith Schengili-Roberts, so much for being here from Toronto. I also want to thank Joe Gelb calling in today from Sunnyvale. And Val, of course, I want to thank you. I want to remind you that our sponsors today were both Zoomin Software and IXIASOFT, and you can find them on the internet. And that's about it for today. Please join us on November 16th for our next webinar called Monologue to Dialogue, Engaging and Collaborating with Your Audience. We'll have our special guest, Matt Abrahams, co-founder and principal of Bold Echo. And Matt will talk to you about how to learn to confidently and assertively manage interaction in presentations while still delivering and reinforcing your message in a compelling way. We hope to see you then. My name's Trey DeGrassi, sitting in for Scott Abel, the Content Wrangler. Thanks so much for being here today, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks, folks.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.